Elara Nix's body screamed awake as the cryopod's hissing seals released a burst of icy vapor. Her first breath was sharp, as if her lungs were relearning the act of breathing. She blinked against the sterile glow of the overhead lights and the frost still clinging to the pod's glass lid. Beyond it, a surreal vista loomed, a planet glowing in eerie shades of red and violet. RYV's Prime. The intercom crackled. All personnel, this is Admiral Vance. Cryo-sequence complete. Report to your designated stations. And welcome to RYV's Prime. Elara groaned as she unbuckled herself, her muscles sluggish and uncooperative. Dr. Raj Patel's voice broke her focus. Elara, you alive over there? His pod was next to hers, its lid already open. His tousled black hair and sharp, tired eyes matched her own disoriented expression. Barely, she muttered, her voice hoarse. I forgot how much I hate cryo. Raj chuckled and extended a hand. Welcome back to the land of the living. She took his hand, grateful for the gesture, and climbed out of the pod. The cryo bay was a hive of activity as other colonists stirred and struggled to adjust. Elara scanned the room, catching sight of Admiral Tobias Vance, tall, rigid, and perpetually grim. He stood at the head of the room, barking orders with military precision. Team leaders, to the command deck immediately, he commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. We have a schedule to keep. Elara suppressed an eye roll. Vance was as inspiring as a concrete wall, but his authority was absolute. She glanced at Raj. Guess that's my cue. The command deck was a stark contrast to the bustling cryo bay. Sleek consoles hummed with activity, and a massive viewport dominated the far wall, framing RYV's Prime in breathtaking detail. The planet's dim red sun cast a haunting glow over its surface, highlighting jagged mountain ranges and sprawling bioluminescent forests. Elara's heart raced. This was it. Humanity's new home. Dr. Nix. Vance's voice pulled her from her reverie. He stood at the central console, his expression as unyielding as ever. We're initiating descent. Your assessment of the landing zone? Elara stepped forward, her fingers dancing over the console's controls. Satellite scans displayed a detailed map of their target zone, a plateau near a river system. The area meets all criteria for initial settlement. Stable terrain, access to water, and minimal seismic activity. But... Vance's eyes narrowed. But what? The electromagnetic interference we detected during orbital scans. It's stronger than anticipated. It could disrupt our equipment. Noted, Vance said curtly. Proceed with the descent. We adapt as necessary. Elara bit back a retort. Adapt as necessary? That mindset had brought Earth to the brink of collapse. But she held her tongue and focused on her work. The lives of 6,000 colonists depended on her expertise. The descent was a symphony of controlled chaos. The Nova Horizon's engines roared as the massive ship pierced RYV's Prime's atmosphere. Alarms blared intermittently, warning of turbulence and electromagnetic spikes. Elara gripped the armrests of her seat, her knuckles white. Around her, the command crew worked in tense silence. We're experiencing significant interference, the pilot announced. Stabilizers are struggling to compensate. Keep us steady, Vance ordered. Failure is not an option. Elara exchanged a glance with Raj, who had joined her on the command deck. His expression mirrored her unease. The ship shuddered violently, and for a terrifying moment, it felt as though they were free-falling. Then, with a final bone-jarring impact, the Nova Horizon touched down. The silence that followed was deafening. Landing complete, the pilot confirmed, her voice tight with relief. Vance wasted no time. All teams, prepare for deployment. Dr. Nix, I want a full environmental analysis within the hour. Elara nodded, her mind already racing. The airlock hissed open, and a rush of cold, metallic-scented air flooded the ship. Stepping onto RYV's Prime for the first time, Elara felt a strange mix of awe and trepidation. The landscape was otherworldly. The ground was covered in a thick, spongy moss that glowed faintly under the dim light. Towering trees with translucent leaves stretched toward the crimson sky, their branches swaying despite the lack of wind. Raj knelt beside a cluster of strange, spore-like structures sprouting from the ground. Fascinating, he murmured. Bioluminescence seems to be a dominant trait here. Elara crouched beside him, her scanner buzzing softly as it analyzed the spores. Careful, she warned. We don't know how these organisms react to us. Dr. Nix, a voice called. She turned to see a young technician running toward her. We're picking up unusual energy readings from the northern quadrant. Elara frowned. Define unusual. The technician hesitated. Fluctuations that don't match any natural patterns. Almost like a signal. Her stomach tightened. Signals implied intent, and intent implied something else. Before she could respond, Vance's voice crackled over the comms. Dr. Nix, report to the command tent immediately. The makeshift command tent was a flurry of activity. Vance stood at the center, his expression as stony as ever. We've detected movement near the landing zone. Unidentified. Could be wildlife. Could be something else. Elara's pulse quickened. Do we have visuals? Not yet, Vance admitted. But I'm not taking chances. I've ordered perimeter defenses activated. Perimeter defenses? Elara repeated, incredulous. We just arrived. We don't even know what's out there. Exactly, Vance said, his tone brooking no argument. We're not here to gamble, Dr. Nix. Our priority is survival. Elara clenched her fists, biting back a retort. She turned to Raj as they left the tent. This is going to end badly, she muttered. Raj sighed. Let's just hope we figure out what we're dealing with before it comes to that. As night fell, the bioluminescent forest around the settlement came alive with eerie light. The colonists moved cautiously, their voices hushed. Elara's scanner beeped softly as she analyzed samples, her mind racing with questions. What was RYV's prime hiding? And could humanity learn to coexist with it, or were they destined to repeat their mistakes? She glanced toward the horizon, where faint, flickering lights danced in the distance. Were they natural phenomena, or something watching them? The questions hung heavy in the air, unanswered. The morning light on RYV's prime was muted, filtered through thick clouds that turned the crimson sky to a bruised purple. Elara stood at the edge of the settlement, watching the bioluminescent moss dim as the sun struggled to assert itself. The air was thick with the scent of iron and something faintly sweet, like decaying fruit. It was alien yet oddly familiar, a contradiction that set her nerves on edge. Raj, any updates on the northern quadrant readings? She asked, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the camp. Raj approached, holding a portable scanner. Still irregular. Whatever it is, it's not just geological activity. The patterns are structured. Almost rhythmic. Elara frowned, her mind racing. Could it be natural phenomena we don't understand yet? Raj hesitated. Possible. But it's unlike anything I've seen. If it's natural, it's deliberate. That makes it unsettling. Before she could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the forest, followed by the unmistakable hum of energy weapons. Elara's comms sprang to life. All personnel, this is Admiral Vance. We have an intruder alert. Return to base immediately. The forest seemed to close in around them as they ran back to the settlement. The towering trees swayed as if alive, their translucent leaves casting shifting shadows on the mossy ground. By the time they reached the base, the perimeter defenses were activated, their pulsating energy barriers a stark contrast to the natural surroundings. What happened? Elara demanded as she entered the command tent. Vance stood over a console, his jaw tight. A holographic display showed a blurry figure moving through the forest, too humanoid to be dismissed as wildlife. Unknown entity breached the outer perimeter, Vance said. No casualties, but it's observing us. We need to neutralize the threat. Neutralize? Elara's voice rose. We don't even know what it is. Exactly why we can't take risks, Vance snapped. This mission isn't about diplomacy, Dr. Nix. It's about survival. Elara glared at him, her fists clenched. If we start shooting at every unknown, we'll turn this planet against us before we even understand it. The tension in the room was palpable. Raj placed a hand on her shoulder. Elara, let's focus on gathering data. We might find answers before things escalate. Reluctantly, she nodded. Fine. But if we provoke whatever's out there, the consequences are on you, Admiral. Vance didn't reply, his attention already back on the console. Outside, Elara and Raj began setting up portable sensors around the perimeter, their movements methodical but tense. The spore-like structures seemed more vibrant than before, their glow pulsing faintly in sync with the distant rhythmic signals. Elara knelt beside one, her scanner buzzing as it collected data. These spores, they're not just plants, she murmured. They're reacting to something. Communication, maybe? Or a warning? Raj crouched beside her, his brow furrowed. If they're part of a network, it could explain the signals. But what are they connected to? As if in response, a low rumble echoed through the ground, followed by a sharp crackle in their comms. Elara's heart raced. Did you hear that? Raj nodded, his eyes wide. It's coming from the northern quadrant. They hurried back to the command tent, where Vance was already reviewing the latest scans. The blurry figure was gone, replaced by a cluster of heat signatures moving in unison. It's not alone, Vance muttered. Looks like a coordinated group. Elara's stomach sank. We need to establish communication. If they're intelligent, attacking them could spark a war. Vance shook his head. Too risky. We'll observe for now, but the defenses stay active. That night, the camp was on high alert. Elara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As she reviewed the data, a chilling realization struck her. The rhythmic signals weren't random. They were a message. And it wasn't welcoming.